Keir Starmer becomes UK Prime Minister. After 14 long years, the Labour Party is back in government. Now, over recent years, Labour have been making some bold statements about the housing market. And to be frank, landlords are scared. In the last week alone, my phone has been ringing off the hook with people asking me what does a new Labour government mean for both landlords and renters. And in this video, I'm going to shed some light exactly what the Labour Party has promised for the housing industry, what impact it's going to have on the property market overall. And as always, I'm going to share with you my opinion on the matter. Stay tuned. I've identified 4 key issues: the rising cost to landlords and how that impacts the rental market, the Renters Reform Bill and how Labour's going to tackle and pick this back up, the housing supply, but also energy efficiency and how that's going to be brought back into the market, seeing that was scrapped at some point last year. So what is the Labour Party's plan for the rental sector? Well, during the general election, the Prime Minister said that their election was all about change. And with a strong majority in place, the Labour Party will now look to act on their manifesto pledges. Labour has a range of plans for the private rental sector. Here's what they're promising. Firstly, abolishing Section 21 without improving the court systems. And of course, this is abolishing the no-fault eviction. And this is different to the Conservative Party promise, because what they were looking to do was delay the abolishment until the court systems were in place and up to date. Now, currently, landlords can take up to around about a year to evict tenants. These are problematic tenants, these are tenants who are not paying rent. So how sensible this is going to be, I'm not exactly sure, but if you're a landlord or a tenant going through a process like this, leave me a comment below, let me know your view. To give tenants the power to challenge unreasonable rent increases. Now, to an extent, tenants already have these powers. In fact, they can take this to the first tier tribunal. So what more powers are tenants going to have for this? Not exactly sure. To ban rental bidding wars between prospective tenants. And as we know, especially with the increased demand that we've seen over the course of the last few years, we can see up to 15 renters bidding against the same rental property. Now, Labour has promised to bring this to an end. They haven't given any specific details how they're going to do this. To introduce a cap on how much rent can be paid in advance. Now, typically students are the ones that pay rent in advance because they don't have UK guarantors and also they don't have any financial background. But it's become very popular, especially tying back that in to the bidding wars, and perhaps that's why they're introducing this, because it's tied into that. To remain competitive, you can offer a higher rent but also offer a whole load of money in advance. And it's not unusual here in London, for example, to be offering £40,000 and £50,000 of the whole year rent in advance. Now, of course, you may think if you have £50,000 lying around, then you're certainly not short of money. The next one is to extend Awaab's law. Now, currently, social landlords are required to address hazards such as mold. Now, this is now going to be brought in not only into the social sector, but also bringing it into the private sector with private landlords. To introduce new energy efficiency standards for rental properties by 2030. Now, it's not clear how or which EPC rating will be the new minimum. And regulating holiday homes. Of course, this is stricter conditions for those holiday lets, but also short-term rentals. We've heard a lot with the mayor of Sadiq Khan pushing and pushing for this to happen. And with now the Labour Party in government, this is something that the Labour Party is going to push so that we can have more stock available in the long-term sector and take them away from those short-term holidays. And lastly, to remove the requirements to replace gas boilers by 2030. And the majority of these changes, of course, do benefit renters, but it does increase risk for landlords. So if for landlords start to see this as an unprofitable business, they may end up selling up even more than what they're doing right now. And this may not be good for, of course, renters out there, because it's going to mean there's going to be less properties out there. And if you're keeping an eye on the market, you'll know that there's increased demand and very low supply, which is what's impacting the rental rates, of course. And if you're finding this video helpful, hit that like button. It really keeps me motivating and shooting more of these videos for you. And let's talk about Labour's plan for tax. When we look at income tax, they've promised they won't touch the basic or even the higher income tax. What about corporation tax, which they've said they will cap at 25%? Now, why is corporation tax important for landlords? Well, if you've been following Section 24, you know that what the government has done in the last few years is bring an end to landlords being able to offset their mortgage interest and other costs from their rental income. Now, what the government has done is they brought that to an end. So previously, as an example, and this is a very loose and simplistic example, if the landlord received a £2,000 rental income, but paid mortgage interest of around £1,000, then their profit was calculated as £1,000, right? £2,000 less £1,000 of cost, £1,000 profit. Now that the government has removed that, if you still have that £2,000 income and have that £1,000 cost, they won't take that into consideration. So your overall profit is going to be £2,000, even if you're only putting £1,000 in your pocket. And so inevitably, this has pushed a lot of landlords into the 40% tax bracket, pushing those costs even higher. I know, it sounds crazy, but that's what the government has done. Is it fair or not? Leave me a comment below. So in response to Section 24, a lot of landlords decided to shift in purchasing and holding their properties in limited companies, which is a way to continue to offset the mortgage interest rates costs against their rental income. And instead, these companies pay corporation tax on their profits, and dividends on salaries can be drawn by the owners. So is there going to be any impact on capping 25% corporation tax? Not really. If we look at it more closely, we know that the majority of landlords don't make a massive amount of profits. So if we look at this cap, 25% is only if you're making more than £250,000 profit. If you're making £50,000 or less, then you're paying the usual 19%. And anything between is going to be tapered between 19 and 25%. So the capped corporation tax rate further incentivizes landlords to incorporate their property holdings. This shift can lead to more professional management of rental properties and potentially greater efficiencies in the rental market. One could say there is an encouragement for incorporation, and perhaps this drive will drive more landlords to conduct themselves more professionally, not only from an accounting point of view, but also from a management and raising those standards. Labour has committed to easing the planning department with a special emphasis, of course, on green and brownfield sites to support development. And this move is intended to increase the availability of land for housing, potentially leading to more construction and for more homes. In theory, this sounds amazing and will resolve a lot of the issues, both in the housing but also in the rental industry. More stock naturally would mean that rents and prices will stabilise. However, the issue is a little bit more complex. Just because you're re-evaluating how the housing and the planning department works, but also reclassifying land, doesn't automatically mean that there's going to be more development. There are several factors that need to be considered: infrastructure needs, development time frame, funding questions, and just needs practical implementation. I mean, Labour's proposal needs a very detailed planning and coordination between various government agencies, local authority, but most importantly, private developers. And another way they're trying to keep that stock available is more protection for social houses, including reviewing the right to buy discounts. And of course, that's something that's going to impact a lot of people out there. So if you're looking to buy your council home, my recommendation is you get a move on that. And moving on to capital gain tax, which I find very interesting because most recently the Conservative, of course, reduced that sum. And now we have a Labour government who is saying that they're going to review this, potentially even increase it. Now, what does that mean for landlords and for people who wanted to sell properties? Well, I, for one, who've been in the property industry for the last 20 years, I know that there are not only landlords, but also homeowners who want to sell. But given the capital gain tax, they'd rather not sell and just keep those properties. Sometimes even refurbishing them and making it work from a homeowner perspective, but also from a landlord perspective. A lot of the times they want out of the game, but those taxes are just far too much for them to swallow. So I'm not sure what kind of incentive this is going to bring. I mean, they want to bring more available stock onto the market for first-time buyers, and yet they're not going to give that incentive to landlords to sell up. Labour's talk of increasing capital gains tax on property sales could discourage investors from selling. reducing market supply and driving up prices. And higher property taxes could push the wealth gap closer, concentrating demand and impacting the property market. And the fact that the UK government can bring more housing policies out the woodworks absolutely means that you should hit that subscribe button so you can keep up to date. And on the same topic, let's talk about stamp duty for non-UK residents, especially those investors out there. Now, of course, the UK is very attractive to investors, especially when it comes to London. And what we do know is that the increased cost for non-UK residents aims to level up the playing field, particularly benefiting first-time buyers who struggle to compete with wealthy foreign investors. And the reason this is important is because the more people that can get onto the property ladder, the more stock that's going to become available for renters. So it all has an impact. And with fewer foreign buyers, prices may grow more slowly, which means that also from a house price point of view, there could be more stabilisation. So more stabilisation both on rental prices and house prices. So Labour's plan to increase stamp duty for non-UK residents aims to benefit local buyers by reducing foreign competition and stabilising property prices. However, like everything, and especially with government intervention, we've got to look at the unintended consequences, especially when we look at the broader economic impact, especially when it comes to London. So what does this all mean for renters? Well, we do know that Labour is definitely more tenant friendly. And we do also know that this is going to provide more security, more stability, and just overall making living costs more predictable, and an improved housing standards should lead to better living conditions. And for landlords, I truly believe this is going to bring more stability to the rental market than what Conservatives brought over the course of the last few years. If we look at, for example, the last 5 years, they've not been able to even get the renters reform bill. Now, all the landlords I speak to is they want this to be done so they know and they can plan ahead. And although the media may portray this as a time of fear, this may be the most stable time that we've had in over a decade. Yes, there may be more regulations, increased costs and everything else, but for professional landlords out there at least, they will be able to adjust. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit that like button, comment and subscribe for more property insights.